What's up, everybody? We're on a podcast now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to give you guys my top 10 characters of Scream 1, kind of this continued celebration of this movie. I recently did a 2025 re-review, and I want to do a 2025 character ranking. I actually did this a couple years ago, purposely didn't rewatch it because I actually want to just go in and say, okay, gut feeling, what's my ranking? And I feel like I have a couple surprises. I feel like maybe certain characters aren't as high as you would think, and some characters are maybe higher than you would think. So let's just get right into it, starting with number 10 being Principal Himbry. Now this, I do feel like is maybe where I put him originally. Fun fact, there's not that many characters in this movie. If you want to do a top 12, you'd be stretching it about as far as it goes. And if you did a top 15, I don't even know if it's possible to do a top 15 unless you start to include like gossiping girls or backgrounds at Stu's house. Like, you'd really have to get creative, I think, to stretch the thing to like 15 or 20. But when it comes to 10, look, Henry Winkler is awesome, and there's a lot of energy to him. He's kind of played, I think, originally as like a red herring, and you think that there's something, in the way that he like caresses Sydney's face, which like maybe that's just a thing that principals did. I was born in 1996, so I can't necessarily speak for the time, but there, there's also something about him, specifically how he acts to those two kids, right, that are running around in the Ghostface outfits. There's part of him that's played as like, okay, could it be him, or is there just kind of more to him, or maybe there's not more to him. Maybe he's kind of exactly what you think he is. And he's dispatched rather easily. He's dispatched rather quickly, and you don't really see him all that much. So pretty hard, I would say, to put him anywhere but 10. There's no massive standouts. He's great in every scene. It's just literally, it's a lack of time. And as opposed to maybe somebody like Randy that's got, more of that flair when it comes to, okay, he's only in it for like however many minutes, and he really has to make an impact in those moments. You don't really get that here. But I think a great character, obviously amazing actor, and did it really well. Okay, number 9, I'm going to put Casey here. And I feel like I also put her kind of low originally. I think this is where there's probably a jump between, 10 and 9. Well, obviously there's a jump, but I mean kind of like a gap in between them. Drew Barrymore does a lot, in just a few minutes of the scene. And, I wasn't around in 1996 to watch it. I talked about in my re-review that I really tried, upon re-reviewing it and watching it again, I tried to look at, okay, how was the marketing? Because, you hear so much about it. You hear so much about how it was such a shock to people that she was killed off, in the time. And you can watch that original trailer and you can kind of see it. I think our eyes are more detective focused now than they were back then. But, I guess if you're not paying attention, I can understand how you'd be, in the belief that, she was a more of a main character and maybe even the lead. I mean, you look at all the posters, even the one kind of behind me. I mean, I know she's kind of at the bottom back there, but, she's always in the front. She's always in the middle. If it's her, Skeet Ulrich, and Neve Campbell, she's the middle of the three. And it's like, okay, well, that's the center. That's a very important. So what am I trying to say? That is it's a big element to it, because of the name power that she had back then, and, to pull that switcheroo in the way that they did. But also to just talk about the character and the performance, like, it's incredible. You kind of owe it to her to put her, like, not a number 10 or not, like, in an honorable mention. You don't really want to do that, considering whenever there's a phone call, right, we do phone call rankings, or we talk about what's the greatest phone call in the entire series, you're always comparing it to Drew. You're always comparing it to Casey Becker. You're always comparing it to the original. And, it's not nearly as, you wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't special. And, well, like, what do you really have there? I mean, there's some amazing beats to it. It's so well written. Roger's voice, and it's tough because you can't really put him, technically in a character list, but he's always so amazing, and it's so different, listening to him in these phone calls for Scream 7, like the trailer, and then going back to Scream 1. His voice is different. He's very rarely used in Scream 1. There's only a couple phone calls in the entire movie. So yeah, there's a lot going on. But Drew's performance as Casey is unbelievable. It really is. It's so good, and it's just the iconic. I don't even necessarily like his cat and mouse. Probably not the right way of doing it. Just this buildup of tension, right? And just something that seems so okay. It's just so standard. It's okay. It's just a boy hitting on her, and then just the way that it ramps up that tension and makes it so terrifying. And her screams and her crying and her panicking and just the desperation desperation. Really, it's a lot of that desperation in her voice of like, leave me alone, stop calling me. So much of that is just so good. It's Casey is probably more of a performance thing than a character. Maybe you could argue that, right? Where it's like, okay, the character of Casey Becker, she's not really much of a character. You don't know necessarily anything about her. She's sitting next to Sydney. There's not really much there. It's more of like, okay, well, it's more of a performance piece, and just how well that scene played out. But I think because of that, you gotta put her, in a top list. And if you're doing a phone call ranking, she is probably number 1. Of course, I will do a phone call ranking eventually on this channel, but she's number 9. Number 8, and I think I did this last time. Number 8, I'm gonna say, is Kenny. I really like Kenny. Anytime I watch this, and the actor who plays Kenny, I always remember. He actually plays Bill, if you know the game The Last of Us. Phenomenal game, and Bill is a phenomenal character, and you can definitely see it, or you definitely know when you know, but then sometimes I forget about it. Kenny is this I would say is a character that shines in limited, probably more than Principal Himbry. He shines in very limited moments, and he shines kind of with just like a good character like charm. He's not like the most aura filled. Does that make sense? Like, he doesn't give off the same vibes as Stu, or even like a Randy. He doesn't kind of like fill the screen with his presence. Like, he's not loud. And I don't even necessarily mean loud like his voice, but he doesn't like command it. He's kind of a more reserved, but just like a good individual. I always think about one of my favorite scenes with Scream 1 is when Gale is talking about, about the story, and that, they have the chance to like prove that a man is innocent, right? That whole line. And he smiles. He goes to smile. And then she says, do you know what that would do for my book sale? Classic. And only Courtney Cox could pull that off. Amazing. And Kenny's frown. And honestly, and Gale's really good, and Courtney Cox is obviously an incredible actress, but that scene, I think, is driven by him, not by her. Because just that feeling in him, that's actually kind of where I think he does take up the whole screen, because it's like, oh, you could see that good. You can see the good. He's kind of in it for that. He likes the idea of being able to do good, and just that he has like a half second of happiness, and then she takes it away from him. And, he's oftentimes a punching bag. He's a punching bag for Gale for the majority of the movie. But even, as he's dying and he points for Sydney a way out. I would even say, even like a deeper layer, the fact that he even cares about Randy in the first place when they're both watching the screen, and he's like, look behind you, kid, look behind, and he's screaming it at the monitor. Again, there's this sense of good in him. Okay, number 7, and this is probably where it starts to get a little controversial. I'm actually going to put Gale. I've said it before. And I don't think it's actually all that controversial that Gale doesn't really take that step until Scream 2. I think if you poll people, you would probably argue that Scream 1 is more of a Sydney movie, and then Scream 2 is more of a Gale movie. And then Scream 3, you can really start debating, which one is which. But I think you could really argue that. And, I mean, maybe not necessarily like the plot. I mean, Scream 2 is actually, I would say, more 50-50. It's really Gale coming into her own and all that stuff, but it's still revolving around Sydney in so many ways. But okay, I'm focusing so much on Scream 2. I mean, yes, there is an origin point. Scream 1 is the origin of Gale's character. And again, super well acted. There are hints of kind of like a deeper person there. And I think that's kind of just what gets her. That's kind of what gets in the way of her being a higher character is I think Courtney Cox plays the role perfectly. I think Gale is just intentionally written to be kind of condensed. She's oftentimes insulting, even when she's playing up to Dewey. There's a lot there that, obviously is very, very cool, especially even just the actors behind the character. And, you could sense that there's actually something growing, and I think that's probably Gale's greatest strength in Scream 1 is that she actually starts to have feelings, and you can tell. Now, they play around with that a little bit in Scream 2, but, I like to, if you just look at Scream 1 without anything else, after it kind of getting in the way, I think you can actually still make that case for Gale's character where, again, she's well written in what she is, but she's very limited. She's not going to have that massive growth opportunity. She kind of is what she is, but there's some slight cracks, in the armor, and you can start to see, okay, there's a little bit, you can tell there's a human, underneath that. So I feel like just that kind of limits where you would have to put her on a list. All right, number 6, I'm going to say is Tatum. I've always been a pretty big Tatum fan. I always kind of focus on her in these movies. I think with the fandom, at least what I've seen in comments and different things on social media, I think you either really like her or you really don't like her. Like, she's either making a top 5, top 6, top 7, or she's not even in your top 10. I think when I first did this, I saw people say that she wouldn't even be in a top 10, or she would be number 10. And, I can get it to a degree. I think maybe polarizing, but to me, and I said this in my re-review, upon rewatching it, I really tried to focus specifically like a character trait in her, which was the friend in Tatum, the kind of this ability to like listen to Sydney and kind of being there. And she pushes Sydney, even with like the cotton stuff, like she does push, but she's written in such a great way. And I think acted honestly in a great way where, she's kind of this person that like is going to push back a little bit, right? Like she's there to listen. She's there to be your best friend. But at the same time, if that best friend is telling her something that she just truly, something feels off with it, she's going to push back just a little. She's not going to make it so you have a full-blown fight and you're going to hate each other for a week. She's going to push back and challenge you. And that's really, on top of like the calling him Mr. Ghostface, I want to be in a sequel, iconic death, all that jazz. I mean, there's some good moments and some funny things, and also obviously mingling with Stu and stuff. But that's where I kind of want to focus, especially in this character ranking, is I focus on Tatum this time as a friend, as Sydney's friend. And maybe that reduces her, but I really don't think it does, because I actually think that's her greatest strength. That is the character. And honestly, as we're approaching Scream 7 and Sydney naming her daughter Tatum, I think that means a lot, because, and not necessarily like, okay, well, her daughter is also going to be this like perfect friend, like archetype. But I think that's really what Tatum was. Now I'm noticing it, in Scream 1. She's a character that can listen and is just there for Sydney. And I really appreciate that. So she makes my top 6. All right, number 5 is Randy. Now, I think I had some difficulty doing like 5-4, maybe even 6-5-4. I think I had some tough times doing. I feel good with Randy, middle of the pack. I again, every time I rewatch it, I always try to find something a little bit different, or you kind of zero in on something different. I think the thing with Randy mainly this time is, look, he's got 3 major scenes in the entire movie, right? Everybody's got the fountain, okay, when they're all together, and they all kind of take turns doing their own thing there, okay? So that's number 1. He's got the blockbuster type arc, with him and Stu and Billy, okay? He's got that, and then, of course, he's got the speech. Now, I think everybody goes to the speech, as you probably should, because it is iconic, and I think that obviously helps him get to number 5, at least on my list. It's an iconic speech, and he's got a lot of charisma. But I really would actually zero in on those elements, and I would actually move to the blockbuster kind of ripoff thing. That is actually where I think he shines, at least upon rewatch. This is like my 6th time rewatching it. This is really where I think he shines the most, and where I kind of zeroed in, because just, again, him and Stu are a dangerous pair together, because, again, they take up so much of that screen. They got a lot of personality, a lot of charisma, and they're back and forth, when Stu's doing like the cutoff thing, like stop talking, all that stuff, and Randy's just kind of going nuts. And I mentioned, I think in the re-review, when Billy comes up, and he definitely acts like a killer, to Randy, and at that point, there's no way he couldn't be a killer, right? And he walks away, and the last line said in that scene is Randy says, "You mean to tell me that that's not a killer?" And I laughed out loud, because it's like, that was perfect. That was such a Randy thing to say. And also, not even just a Randy thing to say, because what do people always kind of say about Randy is he's supposed to be us, right? That's exactly what you would say. If you're trying to make a joke, you're just trying to like lighten it up, but you're also a little serious. If somebody came up to you and acted the way Billy did in that moment, the next thing you would say is, that's definitely the killer. Now, he changes the wording a little bit, right? But that's exactly what you would say, because of course that's the truth, and I love that. And that's the scene, that moment I just thought was so funny, but that entire situation where he's just kind of playing it out, like, what's the motive? It could be me, and here's a little bit of that, but also it has to be Billy, and here's the reasons why. Love it. I think that was really, really, he's only got really those 3 moments in the film. All 3 are really good. I really kind of focused in on this one. Number 4, I'm going to put Dewey. And this one always, I think, is a tough one to put as well, because you kind of want to put him higher, because he's Dewey, he's everybody's like favorite. But at the same time, it's like, well, he doesn't have that much to do, and his death is a little kind of weird, upon rewatching as many times. He's got such a, well, I wouldn't say he's got an arc, but he's got so much he kind of does, and kind of this build up. And then he goes into the house, and then he walks out with a knife in his back, and he's done. And you think about it, that if that really were to be it, I mean, we all know the story, right, of like, that was it, but Wes filmed the, him getting into the ambulance with the thumbs up, and that was there just in case and all that jazz. So we all know that story. I really feel like if he died there, he would be a very, I don't know if I would say forgettable. He would kind of almost be like a Kenny or somebody in that kind of like bottom 3 or 4 where you'd put him there because there are a lot of nice moments. And I think he is, look, he does a lot actually in the little scenes he's in. He's got that charm. He's got that personality. He's got the comedy, the kind of like you don't take him seriously and he wants to be taken seriously, but he also has a lot of heart. And I think, and that's Dewey. That's Dewey in a nutshell, right? He's got that kind of comedic doofus type personality, but he also has so much heart and he cares and he's always going to kind of be there, at least to, the best of his ability. That's him. That's him at his best. And you could argue maybe 5 hurt that a little bit, but then, the way he was taken out maybe redeemed it because he was trying to help out Sam. He died doing, something that classically Dewey would do, which is going out of his way to help somebody. So I think the first film establishes that. This first film establishes who Dewey is, which honestly, as I said about Gale, I think it kind of doesn't do that with Gale. It establishes half of her, but not the other half. Dewey, you get the full picture, you just don't get it a ton, and then he's taken out, and then thank God, they continued to do it because it kept elevating him into a better and better role. Oh, and by the way, his relationship with Tatum, I think I always say it every time I watch it. I always love it. And I never can really zero in on anything new there because there's only a couple scenes with them, but I would watch an entire movie with Tatum and Dewey because those two, I think, work. You 100% believe immediately that they're brother and sister. And I think that's a testament, I think, to the writing of Kevin Williamson, also a testament to those two as actors, that they just can bond in that brother-sister way that I think is actually kind of hard to pull off. Okay, so this is where I think it gets majorly controversial because we only got 3, 2, and 1, and if you know the movie, really we only got 3 characters left, so let's just go through all 3 of them back to back to back. Number 3, I'm going to put Stu. Number 2, I'm going to put Billy. Number 1, I'm going to put Sidney. This is where I think really it can go any which way. I mean, I've seen lists with Stu as number 1. I've seen lists with Sidney as number 1. I don't know if I've seen many lists with Billy, and I also don't know how controversial it is to put Billy ahead of Stu. I really feel like most people put Stu ahead of Billy. Here's the situation, okay? All 3 of them are so good. I don't want to spend 10 minutes each on them. The video's already gone long enough, but Stu is so impactful, and their back and forth in the ending is so good. Literally, anytime Stu is on screen, he lights up the room. He's always got something to say. It's again that charisma and charm of Matthew Lillard. Like it's so perfect. I'm going to give the edge to Billy just because, I watched it in 4K Ultra HD. Now, I don't even know what that means, but, I have only a few movies that are in that. It was that, the anniversary of Scream, they brought it back out, and I don't know, maybe it was the colors, maybe it was the visuals, but every time Billy is on screen, I also kind of felt the same thing. Now, you don't feel literally the same thing from Billy as you do Stu, because those are just 2 different actors. And the way Billy is more reserved versus Stu is just more kind of outwardly going. It's so different. But I actually was really gravitated in the same way that I think people would describe kind of being pulled in by Stu, and that you're kind of like laser focused on him every single scene he's in, which you do. You do that kind of every time. It's the charm. I actually felt the same thing with Billy. Anytime, even if it was a group of them, I kind of was zeroing in on him, whether it was just kind of facial gestures or whatever. I think him and Nev, Skeet and Nev work so well together, and you really, it's an interesting relationship to kind of believe because it doesn't actually feel like those 2 would work. And I think they were dating for 2 years, like in the movie. I don't know how they actually stay together for 2 years because I don't know. Sidney's personality doesn't always feel like it'll jive. And maybe that's a negative. Maybe that's on the writing. Maybe it's on them. I don't know. But they don't always feel like they would actually work as a couple. And maybe that's the point too. But I just was really drawn to Billy. He's got so many lines. The line about the whole movies don't make psychos. Movies make psychos more creative. Like, I never really even focus on that line, but I've seen that line on Twitter and stuff, and I heard that line this time watching it, and I thought, what a fantastic delivery. It was one of those things, you hear it so often, you hear it kind of classically. Obviously, like the whole, your mom's no Sharon Stone, and you hear so many Stu lines, and they always hit. Billy's lines, I don't think you hear as often. We all go a little mad sometimes. Like, just so many of those moments, I think really, they jumped out at me more this time than they ever did before. That's my excuse. Upon rewatching it, a lot of Billy's kind of signature moments, I think, stood out to me in a way that they never did before. And who knows, maybe it was the lighting, maybe it was the 4K Ultra HD thing. And then Sydney. Again, I think this could maybe be controversial. I think a lot of people put Billy or Stu at number 1 and 2, and then maybe Sydney's number 3, but it's her movie. It's her movie. She establishes herself in the first movie as one of the ultimate final girls. I'm not as big into Halloween as I understand. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis is undoubtedly, the main final girl, but I think Neve Campbell or Sidney Prescott would be number 2, pretty easily, at least in my opinion. And she shows it right off the bat. I mean, she's dealing with so much as a character, and also, Neve's performance, I think, is just so good. And again, it's a little bit more subdued. Like, it's not, and maybe that's why her and Billy kind of work, because they are both a little bit more subdued. Like, they're both a little bit more quiet. Their charm is not as like outward as a Randy, or their charisma. I'm maybe using those words too interchangeably, but it's more in than it is out, like Randy or Stu. Those two are just so kind of easy to see it, whereas Billy and Sydney are kind of more reserved. But I mean, she's just got such amazing moments. And I mean, even like the phone call to her is so amazing, where she's playing around and she doesn't even believe him, and she calls his bluff. And just, she's got so many moments. She's going through, like I said, so much. I think she delivers that trauma extremely well. And the movie's doing a lot of stuff as quickly as it can, because it only has so much time to kind of tell her backstory, her mom's backstory, and then also putting her in the center of this killing spree. So I've always really liked Sydney. She's again, like, to me, I like Scream more than Halloween. I can understand like Jamie Lee is, but to me, it's always been Sidney Prescott. So I gotta put her as number 1. I always have. I really think she really is the best character in the film. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.